Welcome to a Burgundy with Tweedy video. The third of those wines from hand-picked Burgundy, which haven't really gone very well so far. And I don't have a fantastic feeling about this either. It's look at the vintage there, 2000. So this is a pretty old wine. It's quite rare that I ever drink anything of this age. But this was a bargain. Put the price down there, which, you know, to be honest, makes me a little bit suspicious, because if this was going to be good, that would have probably been reflected in the price. So it's a Nuits Saint Georges from a producer called Chauvenet. I've had something from that producer before, and again, suspiciously cheap. Why is this at the price that it was? A bit concerned this is going to be another disappointment. But so this is an appropriate use of wine prongs, at least. I think when I first started using wine prongs, I think the advice was any bottle sort of 15 plus years older. I don't know why that's a sort of sudden magic threshold. But this is the time when corks are slightly more likely to disintegrate at the point at which you're taking them out. So theoretically, wine prongs keep the whole thing a bit more intact, and you have a better chance of getting all out without a bit of a disaster. And this cork, at least from what I can see from the top, doesn't look to be in too bad condition, so perhaps it's unnecessary here. 2000 is not exactly ancient, is it? It's 24 years old, so it's fairly old, but okay, let's take a look at the state that's in. It's stained up to, I don't know, about 60% of the way up, but there is still some fresh, unmarked cork there. In my uninformed opinion, I would say that cork certainly has not failed, and it was reasonably tight still, the bottleneck there. So I would hope that has done its job. This is going to be okay, but again, suspiciously cheap, so. Being 24 years old, I would imagine this is likely to have changed colour a little bit. There's still a bit of brightness in that. Tiny bit of browning, but not extensively so. So purely based on appearance and the state of the cork, I'm not yet sort of assuming this is going to be a disaster. On the nose, I would say a sort of subtle kind of maraschino kind of cherry. Something a bit liqueur-y, a little bit thicker, a little bit denser. Maybe a bit of glacé cherry, a bit of maraschino cherry, that kind of thing. And a nice sort of slightly candied sweet hint in amongst that. That also doesn't seem like a bad start. I don't know what sense you're getting for the colour here. I'm looking back at that now. I would say that's slightly on the paler side there, isn't it? As always, the light is a little bit imperfect. Here comes the moment of truth. Okay, that's interesting. Slightly dry, slightly savoury. There is definitely more fruit character there, though. Cherries, possibly some other red berries in with that. Very, very subtle hints of sweetness around the edge, which I quite like. Not getting a lot of acidity there, but perhaps you'd expect that for something a quarter of a century old. I think, you know, acidity does gradually fall away with age in wine, but it's certainly not, you know, flabby, jammy. There is some sort of, you know, fruit character there, and for that to be present, there must be some sort of hint of acidity. Yes, there is still a little bit of a hint of freshness. It's not obviously that old. If I were past this without knowing the vintage, I don't think I would guess it was 24 years old, getting on for a quarter of a century. So I still get a little bit of freshness, a little bit of fruitiness on the palate, and it's not developing yet some of those tertiary aromas or tertiary characteristics that tend to come with age so much. And quite often these older Burgundies, I start to find things like sort of old leather armchairs, and you know, the tobacco and that kind of stuff seems to be more pronounced. But really, this is a cleaner sort of style. It's not quite so gentleman's club. Yeah, relatively light extraction, relatively, I suppose, delicate in a way. Or maybe that's why we haven't got the leather armchairs. Perhaps that's something that comes. Little flies trying to get into the wine. Shall I stick the cork back in? There are probably some woody notes in with this. Little hints of pleasant, sort of delicate, light woody notes on the nose. Relatively light in terms of tannin, though, on the palate. I'm not getting much of a sense of tannin. Again, that's something that does tend to soften with age, so that's pretty subtle. I think that's all right, actually. Maybe third time lucky. with the bottle that did seem a bit of a wild card. I would have expected the first two to be in safer territory. This is the one that I'm a little bit sceptical about, and yet, yeah, it's pleasant. It's a little bit different. So can I come to some sort of meaningful summary here? I think this must be a lighter extracted style of wine to begin with. So it's not exactly classic Nuits Saint Georges to me, because I think of Nuits Saint Georges as being rich, very pure fruit expression. This definitely is fruity rather than other stuff, but the just the sort of extraction of it, you can see that in the colour. It's a sort of lighter style of Nuits Saint Georges, and that has done something slightly, to me, unusual and interesting by being aged for that amount of time. And there might also be slightly floral hints on the nose there as well. And it is overall quite a, despite what I said at the start about, you know, liqueur-y kind of hints, it's quite a pretty nose actually. It's quite pretty and delicate and pleasant on the palate. Don't think anything about this is world-shatteringly amazing, but it certainly is nice, drinkable, and I would say I'm actually quite enjoying this. Perhaps that's why the price is where it is. Interesting to try a very different, fairly well-aged Burgundy there. First impressions at least, I would say, are pretty good. Cheers.